Welcome back, Dean.
Hello, Vito. How are you?
Oh, look at that deep, sexy radio voice. Um, First of all, I wanted to make a quick mention of the. It's been a week already.
Oh my God.
Like Diamond when I filed Chapter 11. Other
Well,
things.
explain for like my girlfriend Jen who might listen to this. What is Diamond?
Diamond Comics is the largest distributor of comics to comic book stores in at least America, if not the world. I'm pretty sure they had international distribution as well. And they are basically close to going out of business. Here's what I read earlier today. Their biggest creditor, like the reason why they're filing Chapter 11, their biggest creditor is Penguin Random House. So take that
Wow.
if you will.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
the other thing I wanted to mention was we lost both Bob Euchre and David Lynch today. And funny enough, for Christmas, my mom got me this, The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer,
Oh wow.
which is a really cool little companion book to the series. So I'm trying to
Wait,
finish it.
I know who David Lynch is. In fact, I was just kind of going through his movies to see what I hadn't watched,
Uh,
right? And I've seen, I mean, I'll do a quick list because I think about like Quentin Tarantino claiming that he only wants to make 10 movies and he feels like he's made nine, so he's waiting to figure out what his 10th movie is.
sure.
And sometimes I feel like that's just like marketing, or maybe he's playing a game in his own head because he's going to go write plays and books anyway, right? So,
I think he's moving into authorship. So
yeah,
I think
well, he's always been an auteur, like in cinema, or I've always thought that he was like the greatest cinematic DJ because the way he would blend genres
yeah.
and pop culture references and history and all that stuff. But then I was thinking, how many movies did David Lynch make? And I'm sure there's a number. He's probably done a little bit more than 10, but
I'm trying to
what,
guess before I look it up.
yeah, you could probably look it up.
I'm going to
You know,
guess feature films, feature films, documentaries, because I'm pretty sure he did a couple of documentaries. I'm
yeah,
going to say eight.
no, more than that.
Really?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. The first movie I ever saw of his was Eraserhead. Around the time I think it came out, and I remember that messed me up. That movie messed me up, and I was like, "Wow, the power of cinema!" And it was, I don't know, it was black and white. It was probably low budget, but what you could do, right,
Mhm.
with ideas in cinema and acting and some cheap effects, could still haunt you.
Yeah.
Um, but then he also he did the Elephant Man. He did the
Yes.
Elephant Man.
Yes.
He did Blue Velvet, messed us all up. Then he came back
Sure.
out and did Blue Velvet with Dennis Hopper and everyone else, and
Mulholland
that was
Drive.
really cool. Mulholland Drive and Lost Highway is like to me is almost a double feature in some ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They what else? Wild at Heart, awesome. I love Wild at Heart. I would hazard to say that Wild at Heart might be one of the influences for Billy Dogma and Jane Legit in my own work.
Oh, I'd like to hear why. Like
Well,
I would never would have picked that up. Like, why would you?
the energy, the rampant kind of unbridled, I don't give a fuck kind of way of living and
Mhm.
sexualizing themselves in some ways,
I
and
see it now.
there is this kind of like, I don't know, free for all kind of feeling, even though there is a story and a narrative with a beginning, middle, end, Wild at Heart. But I remember loving that so much.
I think the
And what
only reason
else?
why I wouldn't have picked that as an influence for that particular um, part of your oeuvre would be that I don't see Nicolas Cage as Billy Dogma,
No,
you
not at
know.
all.
So
Not at
that's
all.
probably where I got the disconnect, but I can totally see it.
Sure. Sure. But again, just kind of like lancing that kind of power,
Mhm.
that they had between each other. It was just a lot of fun. I've never seen Inland Empire, and I've never
Neither
seen
have
David Lynch's Dune.
I. David Lynch's Dune is really tough to get through. I think the best way to watch it is as a child. which is how I first saw it. Like I wasn't a child; I was maybe like 10 or 11 or something. But it's a lot easier to accept a lot because when you watch it now, it's dated. Like the effects
Sure.
are dated and stuff. And then when you think about everything you know about David Lynch, especially with Twin Peaks and everything, and you watch those effects and stuff, you're like, I don't know that it's dated as much as it's David Lynch being David Lynch. Do you know what I mean? It's so weird. And
Well,
like,
I mean, what you're kind of what you're speaking to is kind of like I mean, German expressionism, right?
mhm,
The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, where they would
yeah,
paint the sets and skew them and
right.
just do cut out like, and it was on purpose,
Right.
right? So what you're almost saying is purpose, intentional, right?
Yeah,
Intentional.
it almost, I don't know that he would ever, well, now he won't, because he can't, but I don't know that he would ever admit to having this kind of, it's not low budget, that's for sure. It's just so using the technology that's available to you at the time in a way that you think about how Star Wars had Industrial Light and Magic. This is not how Industrial Light and Magic would do a movie. Do you know what I mean? Like,
But it's funny you say that. Okay, so in a way, I think of David Lynch as a fine artist, right? That
mhm,
uses cinema to paint, right?
right.
And like if you see his special effects in Eraserhead, for instance, where there's this famous dance scene with a woman singing a song, and it looks like fetuses are just dropping from the ceiling onto a stage as she's stepping on with a ukulele or something like that.
Yeah.
And she's got these giant cheeks, and you can tell that they're made with putty, you know? That's intentional. I mean, it may be a budgetary concern, but whereas if you asked David Lynch today to let's say go back and revamp Dune, I don't think he would do what George Lucas does to
I don't think he would
Lucas.
ever do. He was asked to do, I believe it was Return of the Jedi, and he
Huh.
declined. Um, but then went and did Dune. So I think Dune, in a sense, was kind of taking what he would have done with the treatment of Return of the Jedi and doing it with a broader scape uh, story like Dune or like Lord of the Rings or something like that, and just adapting what his ideas were to that material. Um,
Right.
that's not to say that it's not enjoyable. It's just tough to watch, especially since, especially since you had the Delis Villeneuve Dunes that are out now, and you're like, oh, this seems like more like along the lines of what Frank Herbert would have wanted, and even to a lesser degree, or maybe even a greater degree, depending on what you know and what you don't know. It could be Villeneuve's vision is closer to Jodorowsky's vision, which, if you've never seen Jodorowsky's Dune documentary, highly recommend it. It's
Sure.
amazing.
Hmm.
Uh, Mostly because like it's really cool to watch how Jodorowsky like works. I don't think I'd ever understand how he thinks, but
Right.
watching how like he was putting everything into um, his adaptation of the work. I don't think not Dune, but necessarily, but David Lynch. I don't think David Lynch was trying to parse the bridge between George Lucas and Jodorowsky. I think he was trying to just do David Lynch's Dune. You
Sure.
know,
Sure.
to his credit, and again, it's with all of the kind of Star Wars clones that we grew up with in our lifetime, Battlestar Galactica, Last Starfighter, a bunch of other things, Tron to a certain extent, with all those kind of sci-fi movies that we've seen, and then you watch Dune, it stands so far apart from everything else
Right.
visually. Um, and I think that's more because of the person involved than the committee involved in making, like Lawrence Kasdan with George Lucas and Kathleen Kennedy with George Lucas. I think David Lynch, left to his own devices, made a movie that um, he might have toyed with the idea of commercial viability, and then afterwards just said, "Screw it! I don't care about commercial viability anymore, and I'm going to just
Mhm.
make movies the way I want to make movies."
So not having seen David Lynch's Dune is part of what is difficult. Is it the story pacing? Is it the story choices? It doesn't sound like it's necessarily a an effects issue, even though you say they're somewhat dated. And listen, I love old movie. I still watch 1980s horror and
Sure.
1950s, horror movie. Like when you can see that they're dated and everything. I mean, I think the one that still stands the test of time might be John Carpenter's The Thing. Like to
Absolutely.
this day, still
Yeah.
works
Creature
exactly
from
the
the Black
way.
Lagoon also, the original Creature from the Black Lagoon also stands as
Sure.
like,
Frankenstein. Frankenstein,
another one,
absolutely.
and even
You know,
Bride of Frankenstein. But I think
absolutely.
with Dune, the story is a tough story to read, to be
Hmm.
sure. It's 2 to 3 inches thick of a book, unabridged, so it's
Right.
hard to read the story.
Right.
And I think that Lynch did, I don't want to say the best that he could, because that's like unadaptable things. Watchmen, Lord of the Rings, Dune, War and Peace, any Dostoevsky, anything, But the thing is, the attempt is where the art comes from, and it's kind of like a crucible. Um, Terry Gilliam doing the Man of La Mancha, Don Quixote. Um,
Mhm.
like the struggles that he had in getting that movie made really like are a testament to his artistry and to his vision. And I think a lot of the times these artists' visions are so maybe far beyond comprehension at the time that they're made that they're never appreciated until many years later.
Oh, hindsight is always. I mean, when John Carpenter's The Thing came out, it tanked. It
It really, I
tanked.
didn't know that.
Oh
I mean, I
yeah,
was a
no,
kid, so I can't. I probably wasn't cognizant of a lot of horror movies because R-rated movies were kind of like verboten.
sure.
But I'm shocked that it tanked.
Oh, it just did, and people didn't get it, didn't like it, and it's not until latter years that people see it now, and
Yeah.
that's true for a lot of art or a lot of cinema or whatever. Another thing I wanted to mention real quick, obviously, is Twin Peaks.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
how that changed kind of television, or it was that was on regular TV.
That was on ABC, Channel
That was
7
on
in New York.
ABC. That's
I
right.
remember the day it came on. I was at my Aunt Alice's house in Mariners Harbor in Staten Island, and it was a 9 o'clock. It wasn't. It was prime time. It wasn't even like after 10 o'clock. I believe it was a 2 hour premiere, and it was 9 o'clock. And I was so excited. I wanted to see what this weird thing was, and it had a lead-in show that was also purporting to be kind of like avant-garde or outre kind of artsy, but it was like it took place in like Hawaii or something. I remember palm trees. I don't remember what it was called because it didn't resonate with me at the time. And I just thought going into Twin Peaks, it was kind of like these two as a block were going to be this kind of weird night of television. And
Mhm.
there was nothing to prepare you for Twin Peaks. Absolutely. Like it to the point that I watched it. I think I went back to Pennsylvania, like, because I believe it came out while I was still in high school. I went back to Pennsylvania, graduated high school, went to college, dropped out of college, moved to New York, and then staying with my mom. There were two things in Brooklyn, where she lived in Fort Hamilton, that kind of kept me, you know, kind of going because I didn't have a job yet. I had just dropped out of school. I was like kind of like not losing my way, but just like I didn't know what my path was at that point. And there was a comic book store downstairs that was owned by Neil Sino, who I believe we both know. Um, and it was a small comic store, but like kind of introduced me to a lot of newer stuff, at the time. One of them being Young Heroes in Love, which I will defend till I die. And then the other thing was a video store that had the entire collection of Twin Peaks on VHS. So I was like, kind of like like vehement and just like voracious about it. Like I was so like, oh my god, I gotta watch this, And I remember watching it and just going, why did I get weirded out? This is amazing. And it's
Yeah.
like I said about Dune, it's like the span of years that I had to live through to kind of appreciate what was going on in them. And now it's kind of like a Rosetta Stone in a lot of our writing and art, or like shorthand. Like we'll say
Mhm.
like a Pacific Northwest feel, and like it will be like the art of Twin Peaks. Like these kind of like foresty type of rainy type of things. Like it's Twin Peaks has become shorthand for a lot of us.
Well, and supernatural,
Yeah.
and just like a woman that carries a log around, like that's her character. Like it was making fun of soap operas. It was
Hmm.
making fun of crime, and not making fun of, but or parroting or satiring, but also outdoing it by being just creepy as hell
Yeah.
too, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so there was this beautiful Midwestern kind of like uh kitschy type of thing that was happening. And I don't even know if actually I remember when I first saw the first episode, I was living in Denny O'Neil's former apartment. Denny O'Neil, who rest in peace, was a legendary comic book writer, editor for DC Comics and Marvel. Batman, Green Lantern, Green Arrow, Iron Man, those kind of comics. And I befriended his son Larry, who's a great friend of mine in high school. And at some point, Denny moved out. Larry kind of got the apartment, and then me and I don't even think Larry was living with me. I think it was another friend of ours, Drew. And it's possible that we both watched that first episode. And I remember not knowing exactly what to expect, but I was familiar with David Lynch. But I
Hmm.
was like, well, what's he going to do on Channel 7? Like you
Yeah.
pointed out,
Mhm.
ABC. What could he possibly do? Right. And I know there was another guy involved, Frost, somebody
Mark
Frost.
Frost. Yeah.
Okay. And and then they've assembled these actors in this storyline, and essentially it's a murder mystery, right? Who killed Laura Palmer,
Hmm.
right? But it's all the other stuff that's happening to the point where, do you watch True Detective? Have you
I
watched all
watched
four
the
seasons?
first two seasons.
Okay. Season three has got a kind of a great premise to it.
Mhm.
I mean, for that first season though was mwah,
Tops.
basically, I think the way they wrote it was if Spock and Dr. McCoy were detectives, I swear. And when you watch it that way,
Yeah, that's.
that's what it kind of is, So,
I
uh,
always. It's funny you say it like that. I always thought of it more like if you take two like Columbo and like Matlock or something, and you put them on the same show, or like Columbo and Kolchak the Night Stalker,
oh
you put
yeah,
them
yeah,
on the
yeah,
same
yeah.
show, and it's like, what are these two like doing?
Like,
Like
how are they in the same car together
exactly.
talking
Yeah.
about, right? Which is what made it fun,
Mhm.
and so the fourth season, which I love, okay, with Jodie Foster,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and I forget the name of the other actress, the other lead. It's a great season, and it absolutely is paying homage to John Carpenter's The Thing,
Mm.
okay,
Mm.
but also it's got a very Twin Peaks kind of vibe to it,
Yeah, I think it always
So
did. Even maybe not
yeah,
much the second season, but I know the first season did have that kind of feel to it with some of the stuff that McConaughey was putting into his performance anyway. The
sure,
whole
sure.
time as a flat circle, crushing the beer can type of thing.
Yep, yep. And so, like, I don't know. Cheers to I actually busted out a drink. Cheers to David Lynch.
Here's to hey,
My
here's to he. Oh, with the biggie glass.
big glass.
um, the other thing I wanted to mention was something that happened with us. We put the podcast officially on Spotify as of today,
Yep.
and we've been getting a lot of very positive uh, comments and like congratulations and stuff. Like which is weird because it's almost like we had a baby, and it was like people were waiting for us to have the baby. For like 20 years that we've known each other, but
No, we've known each other longer than 20 years, but
yeah,
I
yeah,
I
no,
did post a picture of us from 20 years ago
right.
online at San Diego Comic Con, and it's probably the only time I ever wore a
A
what
color
color
that wasn't
blue
blue.
is that? It's like sky blue. Like, what blue is
It's like a
that?
light
You know?
blue. The only other t-shirt I've ever seen you wear that wasn't blue was an orange shirt that came out. We got him at Jim Hanley's Universe around the time of the Fantastic Four movie that said it's clobbering time. That's
Sorry,
the
time.
only other
That's
shirt you've ever worn that wasn't black. Um, the other thing I wanted to mention though is that I'm getting a lot of positive comments about having a toilet in my office.
Oh, dude, you're
And
starting a trend. You're
I, I,
starting a
I
trend.
must be. And it like we were talking on text today about Happy Days, and I realized, oh, Fonzie had a toilet in his office. His bathroom
Absolutely, man.
was the office. He was like, step in my office. It was the men's room. So
Yeah,
I'm just living the dream, guys.
you are. You're you're I mean, it's funny because you use the term exactamundo, and I had
Yes.
not thought of that in a while.
Yeah, yeah.
And I do watch one of my favorite channels is Me TV, and they bust out Happy Days,
Mhm.
Laverne and Shirley, Mama's Family, like all these old school TV shows, All in the Family. All the Family got deep, man.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That show got deep. You can't make that show. My favorite show is Maude with B. Arthur,
You
Mary Tyler Moore, you know, from back in the day. And actually, I've been watching Three's Company. As corny as it is, it kind of just calms me down at night, man.
Three's
Like
Company is so like John Ritter, God bless him, very much in the vein of like a Three Stooges
oh yeah,
or even Marx Brothers in his delivery. Um, there was a scene. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but very early on, he was talking to Chrissy, Suzanne Summers, about you should. I'm going to hold this up for the video. This is not going to work for the audio podcast, so I apologize, everybody. He was telling Chrissy, you never drink from this side of the glass, which is the outside rim. You always drink from this side. And she goes, why not? And so he drank, and the drink just,
right.
naturally falls out of the inside rim. And it's just like, what a slapsticky, dumb, thing to do. But as a 7, 8 year old, I would do that at parties, for my cousins. And like, I'm stealing John Ritter's like material. So,
And
uh,
meanwhile, he's just creating a wet T-shirt contest,
yeah, totally,
basically.
totally.
So in fact, the first time you see uh it's Jack Tripper,
Hmm.
right? In John Ritter's character in Three's Company. He has been at a party at their house overnight and slept in
In the
the
bathtub, right?
bathtub, and then they try to wake him up with a shower. Anyway,
There
so
is, if you get a chance, Dean, I don't know if you've ever seen it. Now that I know how much you like Three's Company, I'll see if I can find it. The unaired pilot for Three's Company, I think it might have even been called something else. It had Norman Fell, it had Audra Lind, it had Joyce DeWitt, but it had a different. No, it didn't have Joyce DeWitt. It had somebody else. It had two different roommates. It's ostensibly the same episode, but it's a totally different dynamic. Like there's a blonde as well. I forget who it is, and like it's so weird because the Janet character, I don't think she's called Janet in it, but the Janet character is a very, I forget the actress name, very lovely woman. And I think like there might have been a conflict of interest in like, having two, super sexy roommates.
sure,
So you needed like not that Joyce DeWitt wasn't attractive, but
right,
versus Suzanne Summers at the time, like Suzanne Summers was like the standard of beauty at the time.
right, right,
Isn't
right.
it weird too? Like we're talking about Happy Days and all these old shows. Like, isn't it weird how when you're watching these as a younger, like a child in my case, your tendency to find one of them attractive, and granted, you're a kid, you're not attracted sexually or anything, but you're like, that's the pretty one, or
Right.
whatever, you know?
Or considered yeah,
Right.
the standard, as you said, or
Right.
whatever. And who makes those standards? I don't even know, man.
Yeah.
Like it's bizarre, So, and it's funny because when I think about it, in some ways, the Three's Company is hip checking Archie Andrews, Betty
Yes. Yes.
Veronica, right? And Archie Andrews. And so one of the things I I think about when I watch that show is as I've gotten older, is I'm way into the Ropers now, man.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what is up? And you said Audrey Lynn, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Audrey. Yeah.
or Audrey Lynn, I love her. Like there's something about her, even though she's sexually frustrated the entire show, that she's hot, man. Like
In
I'm
the
into her.
in the pilot, she takes less of Mr. Roper's crap.
Right.
Like she's a little more like, I don't want to say she's more feminist, but I think that might be the point of it. Like she's a little more, I don't want to say aggressive, but she's definitely like a different take on the character.
Right, and then when you go to season,
Right.
you change, and my biggest issue or the most dated aspect of it, besides whatever you want to say, if it's sexist or all this stuff, but the premise is just so wildly like what? Like he had to pretend to be gay in order to be roommates with two girls
Right.
in order to be able to live there, which is like what? Even back then, was that even a thing? I guess it was. Are you kidding me?
I think that might have been, well, I mean, you think of bosom buddies too. They had to pretend to be women to live
to to
where
to
they
live with
lived.
other women
And it was
then, right?
because they had no money to get their own place. Because if you think about it, Larry lived upstairs from uh, Janet and Chrissy. So Larry could afford his own place. So Jack just didn't have any money.
He didn't
So,
have any money because he wanted to be a chef or whatever. But
yeah,
okay, here's a fun fact. What's Larry's last name?
I don't know.
When you know his last name, it's even better.
Okay.
Larry Dallas.
Oh my God.
Larry Dallas. What?
Yeah.
What? Oh my God. That's
Like
ridiculous.
the other thing I was thinking about, because we were talking about Happy Days, and I was like, what were my favorite episodes of Happy Days? And I mentioned in our text the episode where Fonzie has to pretend that he's dead. And it's not an episode, it's like a couple of episodes.
Right.
And I was like, oh, I always loved the leather Tuscadero and the pinky Tuscadero
Oh
one.
yeah, totally.
And I always loved when Laverne and Shirley would show up. And
Mhm.
going back to that standard of beauty, like what you were told was attractive and what you find out is attractive as you get older.
Yeah.
I never realized how absolutely smoking hot Penny Marshall was at the time.
Oh,
Like,
totally. And me neither.
yeah,
That's an older, like that's a mature uh
absolutely.
take.
Yeah.
So
Like,
it's
like you look at
crazy.
Cindy Williams and like she's so pretty, she's so pleasant. And then like you
Yes.
watch it and you're like Laverne's obnoxious, and then like as you get older you're like, whoa, Laverne,
No,
that
Laverne's the one you want to hang out with, man.
yeah, that sweater is
I
something
mean,
else.
come on, man. And going back to Pinky Tuscadero. So
Mm,
I used to, I mean, obviously the Fonz had his thumbs up, right?
mm.
He used to do a thing where she would like snap her fingers and slap him like,
Yeah,
and
like
I'm
Curly.
sorry, Leather was weird because she would slap her thigh twice
Mhm.
and then make a gun,
Right.
like which I never understood that one. At least Pinky made some kind of sense to me.
Leather
And
Tuscadero.
and so I think my favorite episode, and again, I'd have to watch all the episodes; it would probably change. But I think
Mm.
my favorite Happy Days, and this just is because I'm a sucker, is the Christmas episode where Fonzie, you find out that Fonzie's alone.
Yeah.
He has no family and has no friends. And Richie and his dad discover this, and they have to figure out a way to get him to come to their home to spend Christmas with them,
Right.
you know. And then he's like a kid in a candy store at some point because he wants to do all the Christmas things toward the end
Yeah.
of the episode. But I remember as a kid, I think I might have cried at that episode.
It's a sad episode. I agree. The other episode that I remember that I don't watch it on MeTV. I watch them on Pluto TV, which is a on smart TVs. It's kind of like a free channel. But I watched the one that I see a lot is you're gonna lose your mind. Cheryl Ladd from Charlie's Angels is
Yeah.
playing like a 1950s kind of teeny bopper ingenue, kind of like a Shelley Fabaret,
Mhm.
which I'm 51 years old, everyone. I should not know these references, but I hung out with old people a lot growing up. I don't know how I know who Shelley Fabaret was at the time. And then so she's portrayed as like this innocent kind of all-American teenage girl, and you find out she drinks, she smokes, she's totally into Richie, but she's not
Right.
into Richie because she's married. And like
Right.
it's this whole thing, like it's like this whole perception thing. And Cheryl Ladd, like this is like years before Charlie's Angels, I would say like 3, 4, 5 years before she takes over for Farrah. And she's just like, where did you find it? And like she was probably just some extra, do you know what I mean, at the time? And they're like, we'll
Sure.
put you,
Sure.
and then she becomes Cheryl Ladd, like
Right.
it's so
Right.
weird, like how that was probably one of her earliest, if not first, roles, and she's perfect.
Oh,
absolutely perfect in it. It's just great.
so I've been watching The Odd Couple from, episode one on with Jen because that's one of her favorite shows,
Mhm.
Jen, my girlfriend. And what was it? I think there was a recent episode. Wait, oh no, it was Three's Company. Sorry.
Mhm.
I'm conflating two different shows right now because they both had a certain same premise. But there's a woman named Sally Kirkland who's an actress.
Yeah.
Look her up. She's done a lot of great stuff. She was one of my mom's good friends. She used to live in my house at one point. My dad finally kicked her out when she was lighting too many candles, and she's like, "You don't." My dad was like, "You don't light candles of children in the house. You could burn the rug down and start a whole fire, whatever." But so there's an episode of Three's Company where Jack is looking for work, and actually you could speak to a real life story where he basically finds out he's got to play a stud in a porno film, and Sally is the porn star that he's
Right.
supposed to have sex with. And I was like, wait a second, I know her, and I've actually talked to her on Facebook as of recent.
Really.
It's crazy. She's still alive, um, and again, I think she famously did. She might have gotten an Oscar nomination
Mhm.
for a movie she did with Paulina Porzakova, I believe.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I know that she did make a movie. I don't know if she got the Oscar nomination or for that. But anyway, it's just so funny when you see people in their early roles,
Mhm.
kind of like what you're saying about Cheryl Ladd,
Yeah.
um, who actually, between her and Jacqueline Smith, were genuine goddesses, like
Yeah.
Linda Carter, like genuine and like holy mackerel, the genetics, of these folks, right?
You know,
But I don't know if you want to veer, if this is going somewhere else, if you have something in
no, no,
mind.
let's do it. Let's go to the next whatever you
So
want
what I want to veer to is go back to Diamond
to.
because of another question I had with you,
Okay.
which was, so Diamond is a distributor that's filed chapter 11 and affecting the comics industry in a very big way, right?
Mhm.
But my question to you, and you might have an answer, or maybe there is an answer, it's official, I don't know. But there's the golden age of comics, which is the beginning of comics,
All
right?
right.
Superman, Batman, that kind of stuff. Then there's a silver age of comics that probably launches, I believe, with the Flash in showcase number 4.
Yeah.
That then and then Marvel then timely responds with Marvel, the launch of Marvel and the Fantastic Four. Okay.
Right. What is
Then
that?
there's the Bronze Age,
63, 63, 64? Which?
61,
Oh,
1961.
61. Okay.
Oh, wait, maybe.
Because I know
Wait,
the Flash came first.
I don't know. I don't know the dates of these things. I'm just trying
Mhm.
to give context, right?
Mhm.
Then there's the Bronze Age, which I believe is like the 1970s when like you had Steve Englehart and Jim Starlin and all these guys, Steve Gerber writing kind of like, I don't know, uh, drug influence comics, let's just say,
Yeah, that's a
you get
fair.
your Howard the Duck, you get your Man Thing,
I think
you
it's
know.
like the I don't want to say the hippie influence because I don't think Denny with Green Lantern, Green Arrow was necessarily hippie influenced, but I think he was very politically influenced. So I
I,
think with a lot of that Democratic National Convention type of
sure, sure.
Kennedy post.
Socially conscious
That's
comics.
the word I'm looking for. Thank you.
There we go. So that's like, let's call it the Bronze Age. Now,
Mhm.
was there ever a Copper Age, or I don't even know, a
I
nickel
think
plated age?
I
Like,
think what they go Dark Knight Returns or maybe Watchmen signals the modern age. One of those.
oh, they called it modern.
Yeah. What?
Okay, and actually, I feel like I'm part of that age, and maybe even you are technically, because I did a comic called The Verdict with writer Martin Powell from Kentucky
Mhm.
in 1987. Was my first like yeah, I had think I inked a cover or something for somebody that might have shown up in a store,
Right.
but I always see The Verdict as being like my entry into
Yeah.
the world of comics, right? And that
Mhm.
was 2 years after being an assistant for Howard Chaykin, Walt Simonson, and Bill Sienkiewicz in 1985, my senior year of high school, right? So my question though is leading toward, what is today's age of comics called? Like, and I actually used to joke it would be the Diamond Age because Diamond became the monopolized
Right.
distributor of comics. So in some ways, that's the Diamond Age. But
Right.
with Chapter 11 being filed, and arguably, they always say, the big two. The big two is Marvel and DC in terms of publishing comics, right? But we also have Raina Telgemeier.
Yeah.
being published, who's like the biggest, probably the biggest cartoonist, and what's his name, Pilkey, who does Dog Boy or something,
Oh,
or
Dave Pilkey, Dav Pilkey, something like that.
Dab Pilkey,
Yeah.
like gigantic force of nature. You have Diary of a Wimpy Kid, like in the book market. But let's just stick back, and they are comics, right? But let's just
Not all of them,
use
but Dogman and Reina's books are definitely comics.
they're definitely
And
comics,
you
and
can
and
even
and
you can
definitely
even
graphic
throw in
novels.
Kazuo Kibushi, who does Amulet. Um,
Oh, there's manga too. There's
yeah,
like the
well,
manga
well,
worlds.
he did. I want to say he did a book called Flight many years ago.
Mhm.
That kind of took off very early. So he's still making books currently, and I think his series is called Amulet, and I think that's a huge one as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. So Amulet is so anyway, there's these, and then there was Jeff Smith's Bone,
Right.
like so you have a ton of, but what is today in the comics sphere, let's call it, the pamphlet, the floppy,
Mhm.
right? That yields collections and graphic novels or, actual graphic novels. Like what is it? And that was what I was gonna say and get to is I would say arguably the third biggest publisher is Kickstarter,
Right.
ergo crowdfunding,
Yeah.
right? So we entering actually the Kickstarter age.
I would say that we're already in the Kickstarter age. I think the Diamond Age. Uh, again, I worked retail for 11 years, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, this was 2010, 2011 is when I stopped working comic book retail. And at the time that we were doing books at Jim Hanley's, I believe Last Gasp was one of our distributors that went out of business around the time before I left.
And
So,
to give quick context to Last Gasp, because
mhm,
I've actually been to their space once and met Ron,
forget. It's been
the
so
guy who,
long.
and I think he passed away.
He did.
Forgive me if I'm wrong. He did. Okay. And some other folks. But that's where you get your R. Crumb. That's where
Yes.
you get your undergrounds,
Yeah.
and alternatives.
That's where we got a lot of, because the thing about Jim Hanley's universe that I think a lot of retailers were, I wouldn't say jealous of, but they were like, how do you make it work? We carried as much independently published books as we did Marvel and DC. Granted, in the time that I was working there, the Spider-Man 9/11 issue came out. The Spider-Man Obama issue came out. We're not done. We're not going to order like a copy of Hate at the same numbers, but we always kept Hate and Eight Ball and all of those in stock for as long as they were available. And like to the point where we had other retailers at some point saying, do you guys still have copies of some independent book that just, like somebody just signed a New York Times bestseller or something like that? And like, we would do like like a trade or whatever. But
You
yeah,
had
like,
Tarantino. You had to do a callback. You had Tarantino come to the store
we did.
and
We had
sign.
the cast of the Fantastic Four come to the store. We had I met Guillermo del Toro at my store for a
Wow.
signing. So we were a vanguard until I think Hurricane Sandy. This is post me leaving the store, but Hurricane Sandy probably did a lot of damage to a lot of the East Coast comic stores, and then pandemic, uh, also made the JHU guys who took over for Jim Hanley, made them shrink to one store now, which I visited when I was in New York, and still one of the best stores you'll ever go to. Like
Oh no,
still carrying,
JHU. It became JHU Comics
right?
with Nick and Ron, and they're some of the greatest retailers ever in
Absolutely.
comics.
And I learned everything as like from a creator standpoint, working comic book retail gives you a lot of tools to knowing how to market, how to where your books sell the best, who's going to champion your stuff, etc. Like not everybody's looking for Billy Dogma. Not everybody's looking for Stray. You know what I mean? So how do you market these in a kind of hostile workplace,
Mhm.
so to speak? And like going back to my visit in New York, this very topic came up. Um, Diamond had not like filed Chapter 11 at that point, But you think about it in hindsight, they're only a week away from doing it. And Nick and I were talking about Kickstarter. And I said, the one thing about Kickstarter that I never really liked doing is I never wanted to be the guy that said, here's my Kickstarter. Thank you for supporting. Now go to the store and buy it in the store, buy another episode or an issue. It'll have an exclusive and I didn't like playing that game because
Mhm.
I don't think anybody should have to pay more than once for your book. You know what I mean? Like it's like, and I feel like doing that, Kickstarter has empowered a lot of creators, no doubt. And I think that doing that and trying to, like, with a lot of publishers are now, like Devil's Due, for a long time now, have been on Kickstarter. A couple of the image imprints go through, like Mark Silvestri's imprint. He goes through Kickstarter for like art books or whatever. Robert Kirkman, very famously, just last year.
Keanu Reeves.
But Robert
Keanu
Kirkman just
Reeves.
with Skybound, they just kickstarted the GI Joe omnibus, the Larry Hama stuff from Marvel.
Oh
It's
wow.
like this beautiful, and they're beautiful. Without
Right.
the money that went into that Kickstarter, produced a fantastic looking book. Cannot complain in that respect. But you know, Nick and Ron have that book. So they had to go through Kickstarter. You can't get that through Diamond.
Right.
So what is Diamond anymore? Like if you're
Well,
going
we're going to find out because Chapter 11 hopefully means they can reorganize.
right,
And I think one of the things they're selling is the international aspect or something. I don't understand it all. I
yeah,
don't understand the business. But also to give quick context to uh, JHU Comics' previous iteration, which was Jim Hanley's universe.
hmm
I remember going there, giant store, like many aisles of comics, right?
across from the Empire State Building, fantastic
Across from the
location.
Empire State, but like across the street, not down the block, like
Mhm.
literally 30 feet away.
Across the
Okay,
street from one of the entrances. Absolutely, yeah.
that's right. And like there was a giant Silver Surfer in the window, that kind of stuff. And you go in there, and I remember me and Seth Kushner, the late great Seth Kushner, who was one of our studio mates,
Mhm.
and I are like bumping to Dan Slott. And Dan Slott's an up and coming writer back then, right? And he kind of sits and talks to us for an hour about some of his Spider-Man ideas.
Yeah.
And he goes on to write Spider-Man for about 10 years or more,
Mhm.
let's say. Now, just today, they announced that he's writing Superman Unlimited.
A new series.
Okay. I can't wait to read Dan Slott's Superman.
Well, it's
He's one of
funny.
the greatest writers of comics.
Dan and I have known each other for I don't know how many years because of the store.
Right.
And he would come in on a Tuesday. And even if he wasn't doing a signing, we're getting the books in on Tuesdays, he would just sign the books. Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and while he's signing the books, he's like, so let me tell you this idea I have for She-Hulk. And
Yeah,
like, and it's like,
exactly.
man, we want to read them too, And he's
Yeah.
like, no, I'm not going to tell you
Shut
that.
up, Dan. Write the
Dan,
damn comic.
Dan basically created the TVA, which was so big in the Loki series. You know what I mean? Like because that appeared in
Well,
his
and you're talking about the time again.
the
You're
time
talking
variance
base,
authority.
which Walt Simonson officially, I
Right,
believe, created in the Fantastic Four.
right.
But then Dan probably took it away, right?
He took it, and what he did was he made it kind of he he did like Ally McBeal as a superhero, which was his She-Hulk, and he
Right.
used the TVA concept that I think he refined what Walt did, and then I think the folks that were doing the Loki series kind of looked at the because I know that he gets credited a lot for a lot of the stuff that they used in the series, but
Sure.
I forgot that Walter did that. I
Oh
forgot.
yeah, man.
Yeah, I got to reread
And
that.
he based the main guy on Mark Grunwald.
Yeah, that's right.
The visuals. And Mark Grunwald was a huge editor and actually wrote a long tenure on Captain America,
Mhm.
uh, including is it Cap Wolf? Is that how you say it?
Yes.
Where he becomes a werewolf.
Yeah.
And one of the other things I want to say about Jim Hanley's universe was like that's where I remember like I'm sitting there looking at trying to go rifle through comics, and I bump into my buddy Carl Bohlers, and Carl
Mhm.
Bohlers is someone I went to college with, who then went on to become an editor in comics, and he's hopped all over the place. But at the time, he was working at Marvel, And I was like, well, what are you working on? He's like, I'm doing like this limited mini series about mutants, called Muties. Do
Hmm.
you want to do one? I was like, yeah, man. So I did he write it? I think he might
I
have
think he
written
wrote it. Yeah.
the Muties that I drew,
Hmm.
uh, that like got me a gig just by hanging out at Jim Hanley, at the comic shop. And that's probably
Yeah.
true for a lot of people that might be listening or watching this. You go to your comic book shop. You don't, like that is your community. And I miss going to the comic shop
Yeah.
because JHU Comics is now only in Staten Island, okay?
Yeah. It's not
Because
convenient for where you live.
exactly. And I did go, and in fact, this is something else I used to do with our late great friend Seth Kushner. Would go to their store when they moved from where they were near the Empire State Building a little more east, or a lot more east.
Hmm.
We still went. We would get, you know, lunch at Korean Town, and then go and get our comics, come back, whatever it was, and it was so much fun, and hang out with these guys and talk like the way we're talking right now.
Right.
I don't have these kind of conversations anymore.
Well, here's, that's where I met you. I met you as a customer. You were a customer. I was working there, and we would just parlay the entire time. You'd be there for about an hour while I'm trying to like stock shelves or whatever, and like
Mhm.
we're just going back and forth. I remember, I remember one time somebody, I think it was Wendy who I used to work with
Yeah,
there.
Wendy. I remember Wendy.
She was on register and like you were just like in the corner where manga would eventually move to, like in the front of the store, but something else was there. And she goes, Dean Haspiel, and you just look up from the like you rise up kind of like the neighbor from
Like
Home
like
Improvement or
Martin
something.
Sheen out of
Yeah,
the
and
out
you
of the
just like
swamp
go like,
water in Apocalypse Now.
and you just blow a kiss like, and everyone's like, what is happening?
Am I still allowed to do that? I don't know.
Or,
Anyway,
or you would
I
go,
want to comment on something else really quick.
yeah,
So earlier you said you used to hang out with older people, meaning that you paid attention to older people, and that's
yeah,
how
my
you
grandparents.
learn about an older actress that there's no reason why you should know that actress,
Right,
right?
right.
So like my father, James Haspiel, who knew Marilyn Monroe, Jane Mansfield, a whole bunch of those blonde bombshells and famous actors, and knew Shelley Winters, who introduced my parents, which is why I'm on planet Earth, because of my
Mhm.
godmother Shelley Winters. Rest in peace, awesome woman. Um, what you're speaking to in some ways, which I think has been lost recently with the kids today, but I'm could be an old man shouting at a cloud, uh, is that we would gravitate toward older people because they had stories,
Mhm.
they had experiences, they had things to say and things to share and to impart,
Right,
for better or for worse.
right.
And I cherish that I was also eager to hear what an older person had to say, you
Mhm.
know, as I get older, and we now are doing a podcast, two older white dudes, basically having a parlay
Right.
or a palaver or palaver, whatever the
Yeah,
word
yeah.
is.
I I remembered like this is a very good illustration, I think, of what you're speaking to. My father served in the Marines during Vietnam, and when he would tell me stories about Vietnam as a kid, they were just frightening. They were always about, and it speaks to generations. I think they were always about gore. This guy got too close to a mortar exploding, and he had to hold his guts in, or uh, somebody got shot right in front of me, or whatever. Like it was always about like the horrors of war. My grandfather, greatest generation, World War II. He this is a very weird story that I remember like so vividly. We went to the Staten Island Mall, and I had walked into the toy store, and he's like, I'm going to sit out here, like on this bench. And I was like, okay, fine, like, and I'll come get you if I need you or whatever. So I was in there and I was like playing around. And I come out, and my grandfather's talking to another older man. And, they're talking. And I let them talk, because like, respect for elders and stuff like that. And I was like, what was that about? And he goes, oh, we were just talking about the war. And then I said, did you know him? And he goes, no. Like, how? Like, like why?
How did you get to talking about war?
Exactly,
They
exactly.
must have
Like,
seen each other, met eyes somehow.
and the thing I always got from my grandfather talking about World War II is like this sense of brotherhood and this sense of like we're in this together.
Yeah.
We're gonna get through. And like a lot of guys didn't get through. And the thing is, like with Vietnam, it was so contested and so like protested and so
Yeah. Yeah.
reviled and stuff that it's easy to see why a lot of folks didn't really make it out of that mentality alive. You know what I mean?
Well, it's really hard to survive and move on from a war that was heavily criticized, and yet they were trying to do their thing. They take their part, you know.
Mhm.
Um, no, I totally get that, man. Like it's war. I don't know how I would. Whenever I watch a war movie, I always wonder how the hell would I fare? How would I do?
You
And when I
know,
saw say the first scene, the first war scene in Saving Private Ryan, you know,
yeah,
it's like,
the
yo,
Normandy scene.
there's no way. There's no
Yeah.
way, right? It's insane. So,
You know,
uh,
what's funny you say that, and like when I was thinking about stuff like that growing up, I was like, yeah, I want to be like I'd rather be in World War II than in Vietnam because at least I have a chance of getting. And then like you think about it, it's war. Like
yeah, man.
the
There
first
isn't
thing
one
that
better than the other. There's
no,
no.
no, not, it doesn't matter if it's like, in Europe or if it's like on a street in Chicago, between gangs, or like in New York in the 1980s or something, like you're in it, you're not guaranteed to coming out of it.
So two quick things. One
Mhm.
is you've shown me the first chapter of a new war comic that you're basically writing, and
Yeah.
I forget the name of the artist. I want to talk about that for
Steve
a minute.
Walker, is that the Pay the Devil?
Pay the Devil. I
Mhm.
want you to talk about that briefly, but also just to bring it back to comics, although that is comics as
Mhm.
well. Jack Kirby,
Yeah.
he was in war, okay? And I remember watching him. Have you ever seen the video where he's talking about being in war?
I might have, but like I always get it confused with the video where he's basically talking shit to Todd McFarlane and Rob Liefeld, you know.
Oh, I've never seen that.
But
I
that's a
did
good one.
see the video that kills me though is that it's his birthday. He's not a video, it's an audio. It's his
Hmm.
birthday. He's on a radio talk show and Stan Lee hears the talk show and calls in.
Mhm.
Have you ever heard this?
No, no.
Oh my God, Vito. So Stan Lee, for all the criticism, of course, that he took a lot of the credit, as it were, right? Uh, he he calls in and they're talking and they haven't talked in years, right?
This is like
And so he's
a
like
radio talk show, like a
something like that on it's
NPR
on
or
the
something.
radio,
Uh-huh.
something like that. And he's wishing him a happy birthday. They start talking a little bit, and at some point, Stanley says, "Jack, did you ever read the comics that I wrote?
Hmm.
Meaning the comics we did together.
Right.
Did you actually ever read my contribution?" He's not saying it in that way. And Jack just kind of, I believe, kind of dismisses him and just like, "I wrote those or whatever, something like that."
Mhm.
But I could hear in Stan's voice that he was being earnest, and he was like, uh, I contribute. That was my contribution. Like
Do you not recognize that I worked on them too, or something?
that
Yeah.
I did too, as much as you did write them, okay, in a lot of ways. Did you see what I added, the value that I added?
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's so heartbreaking to hear that. But going back to the video of him talking about war,
Mhm.
um, Jack's talking about like how he's standing talking to another soldier. And suddenly there's this like, and I could be getting this wrong, so go see the video, but something to the effect of how he suddenly hears this big sound, and I think next to him on the wall, the guy was just evaporated
Wow.
into blood on the wall. And that he had been thrown across the street to the second floor of a window of a building that he was now sitting in.
Holy God.
What is going? And the oddest part, and maybe this is the way I viewed it, he kind of cracks a smile, and I think the smile is so he doesn't start sobbing.
Right. Like
Like
he's not overwhelmed by the memory of it.
he had to just toughen up, crack a smile, like just like a grimace,
Mhm.
like a so that he could just suffer what he just talked about again,
Right.
you know. Unbelievable. That guy. Well, Jack Kirby is gonna. We're probably talking about him every episode we
I
ever
we
do.
probably will. Like, and
You
that's
know.
a good thing.
So what is our answer? What is this age of comics
I
in
say it's
2025?
I would say that we are currently in the Kickstarter age. Not that it's starting with the downfall of Diamond, because Chapter 11 doesn't mean that you disappear. It just means that you
Right.
restructure,
Reorganize.
reorganize, you put your
Right.
money somewhere else or whatever. So I think Diamond's going to be around for a little bit longer, but I think um, creators have already flocked to Kickstarter. Like they're already there.
But
Not
what does that mean? What does that mean for the retailers then? Because I
Well,
just
that's the
listened to a
thing.
3 hour conversation between Adam Freeman and Brian Hibbs,
Oh
which was
boy.
epic and unbelievable, and they fought the entire time. And I can send you a link. It's unbelievable.
Like
And
we should probably put that link in the show notes, just
oh
so
my
you can
God.
find it.
Oh my God. It's
Yeah.
incredible. And I had an opportunity to talking to Brian Hibbs recently about my own where am I going with my comics type thing.
Mhm.
And he had his thoughts, his he was really smart and kind.
I love
And I know Adam as well, you know, and
I
he's
love
a
them
cool guy.
both. Like they like
Yeah.
I Adam was my roommate for a little while. He lived with me and Michelle when he first moved to New York. He had nowhere. Funniest story you'll ever hear. I didn't know Adam. I did not know him at all. We talked to each other once, maybe twice on a retailer forum, and that was it. He's moving to New York. He's like, "Does anybody have a place I can stay?" Sure, you can stay with me, Adam. Me and my wife, and our dogs. And he stayed with us for a couple of months. And the what a guy! I love him. I absolutely adore Adam.
He's a good guy. He's a good guy.
And Brian, I met through Jim Hanley. Brian and Jim Hanley and Rory from what was Rory's store in San Francisco or Oakland? I can't remember, but Rory Root.
Rory Root. Yep.
Like the three of them were kind of like um, two brothers and and somebody's kid, like their nephew. You know what I mean? So simpatico. And Jim and Rory were like brothers. Even though I think Jim was significantly older than Rory at the time. Rory passed away. Another fantastic retailer. There's so many good retailers in this country. Um, I just want to like list them all, but like I embarrass myself by forgetting somebody. But Brian, I met him at the DC retailer retreat a couple of years ago, while I was still at Jim Hanley. I can't say a couple; it's like almost 15 years ago at this point.
Sure.
And
Sure.
I was just taken aback by his passion and
Oh
by
yeah.
his knowledge. Like, again, like when you hang with Rory, Jim, and maybe even to another greater extent, um, the gentleman that owned Golden Apple in LA. Like the
Hmm.
four of them, like if you're Brian and you're sitting at the feet of these three guys, you've learned everything.
Yeah.
I truly believe that Brian Hedge is one of the smartest, most well thought retailers in the industry. And I put him, in the same category as Nick and Ron, who I worked with, and I saw them learn all this stuff. So
Hmm.
like, they're all kind of like in the same kind of bleed to me. Like these are really great retailers.
And every month, Brian writes what's called a column called "Tilting at Windmills."
Hmm.
Does Heidi McDonald publish it on the Beat, or at least
Can't remember.
links to it somehow, whatever,
Hmm.
and talks about it. So I mean, listen, I don't read a lot of those because I'm a creator and I'm just trying to make the comics. But now that I'm publishing, uh, I got to think more about
Right.
the retail aspect, right? So I don't know if you had some questions to ask me because sometimes we like to prompt each other.
Yeah,
I had maybe a couple, but
I
do
know
you,
I know you had one hanging from a couple of weeks ago, so I'll let you get to yours. But I did want to show everyone out there watching. Uh, Today is the 16th of January, so this will be up
2025?
of 2025. This will come out next week. The 15th of January saw the release of New Gods 2.
Oh, number two,
Yeah, and I don't want to spoil anything.
right?
This panel towards the end of the issue is Evan Cagle's version of Mantis, and it is
Wow.
beautiful,
Wow.
absolutely beautiful.
That's awesome.
We were talking about New Gods last week, and I said, like I
Right.
am really enjoying it. issue two is usually where everyone drops off. Like, and this is a retail.
Sure.
This is what you learn in retailing as a creator. So here's a free lesson for you. Retailing, retailers will always drop their orders on number two because issue one hasn't arrived in the store yet. So you might be high on a book and say, okay, we're going to order 1,000 of these.
Right.
That's a pie in the sky number. Nobody really sells those numbers unless you're
Right.
generally doing Hush or something, which is actually going to happen again, Hush too. But
That's right.
let's say we're going to do 1,000 copies of issue one. Now, issue two is just being solicited. We don't know if we're going to sell all 1,000 of these, so we're going to have to hedge our bets and go down to 500. So
Right.
twos are always the drop off with ordering, and then issue three is when it starts picking up again because now that issue three is being solicited, issue one is in the stores. So I can read issue one and go, we didn't get enough of issue two. Let's go back up to issue three. So now, that being said, run out and grab these any way you can because issue two, it starts kicking in and it's amazing. Like, again, this is probably going to be the book of 2025 when it's all said and done. It's 12 issues. So this is probably going to be the book that I talk about the most on this show, although, I'll always praise Mark Waid's work.
Oh yeah. Oh
Justice
yeah.
League Unlimited and Batman and Robin Year One are both fantastic reads, and you should get them too.
You got to hook me up with the that
Issue two,
issue
yeah, I
because
gotta find, I
again,
gotta get the PDF
yeah,
for it.
yeah. Um, what was I going to say? So I guess my question, and also now that you've recommended, I kind of have a recommendation, but it's not a comics recommendation, so maybe I'll save it for the end.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but here's my weird question, and actually I wrote it down differently on a Word doc. So hold on a second. Okay, you ready for this?
I am ready.
When did you quit comics? If never, why? And if not, why not? And then I
I,
have an answer.
that's a good question. I mean, I stopped buying comics at some point during high school because I didn't know where to buy them. That's as a purchaser, as a customer, consumer. Um, but once I found out, I was buying them, as often as possible. There were like throughout high school, there were holes in my collection. Um, because where I got my comics in high school was a newsstand in a Hallmark store. And this is small town Pennsylvania. I was not in a big city where there were those options. Um, Funny enough, I think Todd McDevitt, who runs or who owns, I should say that John Engel, a good friend of mine, runs the New Dimension Comics franchise here in Western Pennsylvania, which is where I get my comics here in Pennsylvania. I get them at New Dimension in Butler, Pennsylvania. But Todd was a couple of years from opening up his first store. So, this is the only way I can get these comics at this point until I go to college, where I have two comic stores at my disposal. I went to the University of Pittsburgh, so I had Phantom of the Attic, which is still around. Highly recommend their store now. It's very much in the JHU Comics vein. Like they carry a lot of stuff. If you're in the Pittsburgh area, go there, please. And the other place was Comics Crypt, which was a smaller store that opened in Oakland, where I was going to school, and I actually ended up working there. So there wasn't a point where I stopped buying. Like there's always like dips in and out, and like I didn't know very many people that were reading comics until I dropped out of college and moved back to New York, and that's when I met Nick and Ron. So like we had that conversation going, and my cousin Robert also was a very big comic book fan, so we were always talking about comics. So I've never quit buying comics, which I'm sure my wife, you know, wants to spend or action figures probably more so. But as a creator, I remember quitting creating comics many times. And
That's where I was. That's what I was really asking because it just to interrupt for a second.
Mhm.
I think I've always been buying comics since I started buying comics at the newsstand, right? And then you
Mhm.
discover, oh my God, there's a comic shop. And for me, it was West Side Comics, Funny Business. I forget the names of the other ones. Forbidden Planet, of course. St. Mark's Comics, which closed, shuttered at some point, and then reopened at Industry City here in Brooklyn with
Brooklyn, yeah.
Mitch Cutler and gang, um, JHU, Jim Hanley's. So I've always had access to comics, although when I would, in the summertime, when I would go to, it's going to sound really privileged, and it's not, trust me, maybe it is, but my parents bought a cabin in East Hampton.
Mhm.
And so me and my brother, my late brother Mike, would be in the summer house, let's call it, sleeping in the living room. And I was craving comics every week. And my mother was working at the New York State Council of the Arts as a deputy director. And I would ask her, please, could you go pick up these different titles at the comic shop or wherever she got them?
Mhm.
And she would bring me every week another set of comics. Thank God, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and so it kept me, steeped within the realm that I loved, But the real question I had, the thing I was trying to prompt was, and then I have my answers. Yeah, you're as a creator, when did you quit comics? And it's almost like about this phoenix rising, a rebirth. Like
Mhm. I
you
don't, I
quit
don't,
because of a certain reason. And again, let's talk about
yeah,
that briefly.
yeah. The reason I remember one of the reasons was I had written a Superman comic for Superman Confidential, and like I mentioned this a couple, I think last week when we were talking about Julian and my Superman comic that I wrote. Um, it got canceled because someone high up at DC said, "Who approved this?" And my editor was like, "I did." And he's like, "Why is this guy writing this book? This book is for superstar." This is the quote. "This book is for superstars. This guy is not a superstar." So I quit. I was like, "Nope, I'm not going to go through this again." Then what happened was um, Keith Champagne, who's a really good friend of mine, he probably more known for being an inker than anything, but Keith started writing, and he had written a story about the guy running away on the cover of Action Comics #1, and like
He's
what?
holding his head. He's
Yes.
running toward. And in fact, real quick, I did a Superman story 2 or 3 years ago now that Cena Grace wrote,
Mhm.
where at some point we have Superman's son now, and I decided to draw him doing the car thing, and
Uh-huh.
I'm the guy running away. I drew myself as anyway. Go ahead. Sorry.
So what happened was DC lost a lawsuit against that was brought on by the Schuster Siegel estate. And so what it said was that they could not, it had something to do specifically with Action Comics #1. I'm forgetting the actual details. I know I've written about it and blogged about it, a couple of different times, but I can't remember the details right now. So this is why my editor, like the editor of the book of Superman, Superman proper, not Superman Confidential, but Superman proper, was rushing down the hall saying, "Does anybody have a one-issue Superman story?"
Right.
Mike Siglain said, "I do." And that's how my book got published. It like basically I was like told I'd probably never get that lucky again. I probably never work with DC again, which to this date I have not worked with DC again. And I have pitched. I have tried to, work with DC a couple times, but I'm not, when I first started writing comics, it was never to write Batman or Superman or Spider-Man or the X-Men. And I've been very lucky and blessed that I've had the opportunity to write Batman with one of my best friends right here. I've been lucky to write Superman, an entire issue of Superman that is sandwiched between a James Robinson run and a Kurt Busiek run, and is in sequence. It's not like a special one-off. It is
Right.
in the run of Superman. I've been lucky enough to write Wolverine. I've been not lucky enough to, and it's all just luck and blessings and whatever the universe bestows upon me. Like I'm blessed. I know this. Um, but like that was one of the times that I quit. I quit when FCHS didn't get enough orders from Diamond. So Diamond, who wins now? Um, And like we had to
Oh,
reach.
wait. FCHS. Just quickly
Yeah,
say
yeah,
what that is
I'm gonna.
again. Okay.
That was with Ad House Books with Chris Pitzer. Chris Pitzer actually put a teaser of it in the free comic book day. I actually, if I look through my stack here, I could probably find it. But FCHS was going to be like a kind of semi-autobiographical story about my time when I met my wife in high school,
Mm,
and
mm,
with some fictionalization to make me look cooler because I definitely wasn't the guy that I portrayed myself to be in the book. But it didn't get enough pre-orders through Diamond, and I remember very distinctly that phone call that I got from Chris, and I was just like bummed. And day later, Tom Spurgeon and Alex Segura are like, "Why are people not ordering this book? This book is beautiful." Rachel Freire, who I don't speak to anymore, unfortunately, probably as a result of this not working out, but Rachel was like weird like child of Jaime Hernandez,
yep.
like in her
Yep.
art, like it's very charming and archy, but also like locas and stuff, so like it had everything going for it, but
Yep.
it didn't have the creators, I guess, or it didn't have, the numbers really. And like both Tom and Alex went to bat for me like in public and like, you guys are insane, so um so yeah, what happens is I've now learned, especially after years of being on antidepressants at this point and going to therapy, I've learned that it's okay to be upset and it's okay
Hmm.
to quit. But for me, I know that like my brain thinks all the time and is always coming up with ideas, and it's always sending Matt Major an idea for a character or a comic.
Hmm.
And my brain doesn't quit. So if my brain doesn't quit, I can't actually quit. So it's
Right.
just take that day, get upset, rage, cry, whatever you got to do. Tomorrow we're getting back to it, and we're going to figure it out a different way.
I was gonna say, like, I feel like every other Substack you publish is you quitting
Oh yeah.
Stray.
Oh
Forget
yeah.
comics, just Stray
Yeah, yeah.
alone. Like so. I mean, I jokingly, I feel like I've said to your face that you're like sometimes you're like the Eeyore of comics.
I've heard the same sentiment said much worse in my life. Like not so kind. Like in that
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
some of
Because
them from
Eeyore is cute, right? Yeah.
some of those came from my wife herself. Like stop being a bitch and get back to it.
Stop being a bitch, man. And
Yeah.
like you said,
So
it can't help. It comes knocking on your door and on your noggin all the time. Like you
hmm.
cannot help yourself. And listen, if anybody's trying to do comics for to be rich and famous, you're an idiot. It could happen, whatever. And by the way, don't ever become famous because the elephant in the room this episode is the person we haven't talked about that
Right.
also happened this week.
That
Okay.
that was very famous after writing comics and went on to write many a novel. And
And TV shows and everything else.
I don't wish to talk about them. I don't.
Don't have to. We
Yeah.
don't got it. But yeah, so my response to when did I quit comics? I never quit comics until 2 years ago.
Hmm.
You know when I quit comics? When I did COVID Cop.
Hmm.
And so what I mean by that is I started to crowdfund and self-publish. I mean, I've made mini comics. I've done some version of quote self-publishing of some sort,
Hmm.
but not to the extent of I could show you my table right now that's on the other end of the room that's going to have me here for a good week of handwriting everybody's address and mailing out
Yeah.
the next, my copies of Chest Face to all my supporters and backers. Okay.
Mhm.
uh and having the conversation about how do I belong in the retail store? How do I get to the retail store? I'm not sure yet. Right now, I'm going to people's doorsteps and mailboxes.
Mhm.
Thankfully, thank
Right.
God, and not enough to really sustain a living at this in Brooklyn, New York. But I quit comics 2 years ago when I became allergic to pitching to publishers that would
Uh,
also be doing the same thing I'm doing by myself. Okay. that maybe have a different kind of Rolodex than I do, and would absolutely get me into the store for the impulse buy, you know? And
Yeah.
so I'm constantly learning. This is all an experiment right now, and it could absolutely, I could fall and crash and burn terribly, you know?
This is kind of why I say we're currently in the Kickstarter age of comics, because
Right.
one of the things that happened in the modern age, even in the diamond age, let's say, is that we saw, as we came up, we saw creators get more power. Image Comics happened in our lifetime. So we saw creators, get more, I don't want to say power, because even though I just said it, power is very,
How about agency?
there you go. We saw creators get more agency and realize their value, which is the biggest thing in the world. And I tell this to everybody that asks me, how do I, when I want to write comics, how do I know what to charge? And I go, another free lesson for you, everybody. You take your daily rate at work if you have a day job, and you go, this is my hourly rate, so let me take track of that. It takes me 6 hours a day. That's your rate, because you have to show people what you're worth. If I'm missing work to do this, then I need to make sure I make that work up. So you charge the rate that you make at work. When you get to a point where you can charge more, that's your rate. You just keep, increasing with your value increasing, and with your stock in yourself. And the thing is, you got to treat it all like uh, initial public offerings with stocks and bonds. You are like, that's what Kickstarter is. You're basically saying, here's your investment, everyone. I need this amount of capital to make this a reality. So
Right.
this is what the IPO. This is what the IPO is. This is what the cost of it is. Get in on the ground floor, and then we're going to build something together.
But if I may, I also, so you're speaking as an investor at that point, right? And that's cool, right?
Sure.
And I
Yeah.
think that gives
It's more of a mentality than it is an actuality. Like,
right.
that's what we as creators have to remember, that these people outside watching this and reading our stuff and listening to our podcast, they are all potential investors. That's
So potential investors, but also it's a pre-order
Yeah,
in some ways,
yeah.
like just like when you go on, I'll say Amazon, and there's a book about to come out and you pre-order it, so you pay for it so that it arrives on your doorstep the day it's released or
Mm.
something, same type of idea, so it's a pre-order, it's an investment game, and it creates a certain sense of loyalty, like when a creator can acknowledge their fans, their backers, their investors, whoever, friends, family, like, thank you for allowing me to continue to create more full time than having to take a job,
Right.
as a plumber or working somewhere. It takes away from the time of me creating, because I need to make a living.
What
And
would be your what would be your
that
day
might be
job
what would be my day job.
at this point? Like, like if
I
you
don't think I could actually do it, but I've always respected, speaking of mail, what mailmen do. At least when they
look
do
at
it
the
well.
Harvey P car in you.
Dude, I've said it for years. There were
Yeah,
three jobs I said that I would do if I wasn't a creator: mailman, uh, a cook because I love food, and I
I
would
was gonna
love
say,
to
I
like
could see
work
you
in a
working in a
diner and
kitchen.
do the short cook type thing. I don't think I want to be a chef. I just want to make burgers and
Right.
spaghetti and whatever. Um, and then the third one I always said until I realized how much it would suck is a paramedic. And the
Ooh.
reason why it would suck is because I'm going to climb five, stairwells to bring down a 400-pound person, break my back to try to keep them alive for a half hour before we get them to the hospital where they die. Like, that sounds very bleak, but
Because it is, and like it takes. Let me tell you, Michelle, my wife, nurse for 20 years.
yep.
It takes a special person. Like, I
Oh
could not.
yeah.
Like, I
Oh
can't.
yeah.
Like, I remember I walked into a um, hospital where my grandmother who would eventually pass away about a week later. I went to go visit her, and I walk in and she's asleep, but they're changing one of the meters, one of the machines, and it's just flatlining the sound. And I go, great, I got here in time to watch her die. I can't
Oh,
deal. And they're like, oh, we're just changing. And I was just like, holy
oh
shit,
my
this is
God.
too much for me to deal with. So,
Dude, man.
so
The
yeah,
stress, the anxiety, oh my God, the responsibility of another
yeah,
human being's life. That's why I worry about if I ever bartended. Like,
yeah,
would I actually serve it that extra drink to that drunk to make
yeah.
money so they can get into a car, drive away, kill themselves or someone else?
Right. That's
I
tough.
can't take that, I don't know how to deal with that.
It's also the reason why I've never joined the military is because when you break it down to its super core, if you're ever in a war situation, you have to become a murderer. And I
Yeah,
don't think I can do that. And I think it takes a special person to join the military and then to serve in a wartime environment. I don't envy that for anybody at all. Like I think as an American, I can say I'm lucky that I was never forced or
right.
drafted into serving in the military because I don't know that I would have been able to do the things that those guys do at all.
Dude, I don't mind writing and drawing killers and
Right.
monsters, and I like science fiction guns in my movies, and all that
Mhm.
stuff. But I'm still the guy that I see a cockroach, I pick it up and I save it and I put it out the window and
I'm
hope
the
for the
guy.
best.
I'm the guy that called to get the stink bugs out of the house.
All
So
right,
you
so
you had
did you
mentioned
have a question or should we wrap this up or what are you
no,
feeling?
but you did mention Pay the Devil. You wanted to talk about
Yes,
that.
please tell me quickly about Pay the Devil. Tell
Pay the
tell
Devil
everybody.
is a hopefully the thing we're trying to achieve is the Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips one-time graphic novel that they've been very successful with doing over at Image. And it's myself and Steve Walker. Steve is an instructor over at SVA, but he's also one of the most hardworking artists I know, and criminally underrated as a artist. And we both just love genre stuff. So Pay the Devil is basically about a Vietnam vet coming back to exact revenge. I tell everybody it's um, Halloween or Friday the 13th with a Vietnam vet instead of
Oh,
a mentally ill or an undying character. So it's definitely brutal. It's definitely adult oriented. It's definitely like in your Vertigo vein, and I'm hoping that we will have it ready for Baltimore this year because we did debut it, so to speak, last year Baltimore, and the idea is that since it's there and a couple people have seen it, we want to give the full thing at Baltimore.
absolutely. Absolutely. Um, there's a Vietnam horror movie, like zombie movie, that has to do with a Vietnam vet that comes back, and it's a commentary on Vietnam.
Hmm.
And I think that the guy is actually dead, but doesn't know it, or something like that. Anyway, I'll try to find the title. I'll send it to
Yeah.
you. It's a movie from the 70s, I believe, I think. And again, I can't remember the title right now. So my one little recommendation, because I love movies, is did you see a movie called Barbarian?
Not anytime recently, no.
It's basically starts off as an Airbnb situation.
Okay, I'm already interested.
And the girl goes and can't get in or whatever, and she's like, "What's up with I got the wrong how to unlock the door?" And a light goes on, and there's a dude inside, and he's like they both booked the Airbnb the same night,
Okay.
and it becomes an Airbnb kind of horror until the horror really happens, which I won't
Right.
even tell you what's happening in the basement. And I don't want to spoil anything beyond that. It's
Okay.
so good. Anyway, the reason why I bring that up, which is it's one of my favorite horror movies of the last decade, called Barbarian. Okay. The producer of Barbarian produced a movie called Strange Darling. Have you heard of Strange Darling?
In passing, I couldn't.
It's a recent film. It's 2024.
Mhm.
So I guess I'm making a double recommendation. See
Hmm.
Barbarian, but don't see the trailer. Trust me. Just
Okay.
going cold. It's great. And then check out Strange Darling, which isn't as good as Barbarian, but it's pretty good and it plays with time, let's just say.
Okay.
Okay. Uh, but those are thriller horror movies, so I don't know if that's your bag, but
I,
I like
I'm
that
gonna,
kind of stuff.
I'm gonna throw a recommendation out of an old movie that I watched. I'll actually go two movies,
Okay.
two old movies that I watched recently. That one I'd never seen before, and the other one I haven't seen since I was a kid. The first one, the former, is a movie called Bell, Book and Candle, and it
I've
has
heard of that.
Jimmy Stewart and Kim Novak. And it's weird because these are two Hitchcock, regulars.
Yep.
This isn't a Hitchcock movie, and it's the thing that is it's a very charming movie. It's very goofy. Jack Lemmon's in it in a very early role.
Love Jack.
Um, Also in it, and like I don't understand how they ever made this woman ugly in a movie because she's absolutely like she just shines through it. Is Elsa Lancaster, who played the Bride of Frankenstein.
Oh,
Uh, I might be saying her name, it might be Elsa Lanchester. I can't remember now, but um, like absolutely, like her eyes are just like
yep.
luminescent, and it's a fun, dopey movie where a woman charms a man to fall in love with her, and Jimmy Stewart's way too old to be like the leading man type at this
Right.
point, but it still works. And then
Right.
like I believe the story is he quit any role that he would be a leading man in until Hitchcock called him.
Oh, wow.
So there's that one. And then the other one, we mentioned Shelley Winters earlier. I just rewatched The Towering Inferno.
Oh,
And while I was watching it, I was live tweeting with Dean. And I was like, what is Red Skelton's deal? Like, what is happening? Stella Stevens, Jesus God.
oh my gosh, Stellan Stevens.
You know,
Stellan
like
Stevens.
and
Wait,
Shelley,
no, not Towering in front of you. You're talking about,
oh,
sorry, you're talking
Poseidon
about the
Adventure,
Poseidon
Poseidon
Adventure.
Adventure. Thank you. Like,
But
but
by the
yeah,
way, those two movies though together, that's a night.
oh,
That Irwin Allen, right? Irwin Allen's The
Airport, what
House.
is it? Airport 79 or something? But throw that in.
70, is it 79 or
77,
76?
like one of the two.
77 maybe. Whatever. One of those.
Throw that.
Earthquake.
God. Like, but
Irwin Allen,
Poseidon
man. Irwin
Adventure
Allen.
is, you know what the thing about Poseidon Adventure that I think I never really caught on as a kid when I first saw it? Because I watched it on Channel 11 in New York, WPXI. Um, and it was on with commercial breaks and like on a Friday night, maybe. Um, you don't, the thing you don't get a chance to, and this is probably, yeah, no shit, Vito, that's obvious. The thing you don't get a chance to really appreciate is the tension
Mm-hmm.
like in a lot of the scenes. And like some of the scenes, like when you watch the tension, you're like, this is just so manufactured. Like they're climbing up a Christmas tree and we got to get
Right.
up there before the Christmas tree falls and before the water
Right.
comes. And it's like, all right, yeah, I get it. But like the other parts, the more quiet parts where they're like, I just heard a creak, like something's breaking, like that horror movie tension,
Right. Right.
they
Right.
nail it.
Yeah.
And like Pamela Sue Martin's in it, who would go on
Yep.
Nancy
Nancy
Drew.
Drew. Right.
Oh man, what a
Right.
great movie.
But also, and I don't know why I'm blanking his name, the priest,
Oh God.
the
Oh,
best actor in the world.
Gene Hackman.
Gene Hackman
Yes.
has that conversation with God while he's trying
Mhm.
to open that wheel to open up this seal to get these people to save them before what happens.
Yeah.
Yo, like and Shelley, I remember I could show you a picture, maybe the next time or somewhere at some point, where I'm a little kid and me and my brother being taken to see the premiere of the
Wow.
Poseidon Adventure with my godmother. And she says to us, spoiler, so I'm gonna die in the movie, but it's just acting because I'm here right now, right? Like, so when I die, don't get worried because I'm here. It's
That's
okay,
right.
you know? And like we saw the movies, little tiny tots of human beings, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and there's my godmother who did the most incredible thing in the movie. Like
Yeah.
she's such a hero, you
Yeah.
know? And anyway, that's a whole other thing,
It's
man.
so yeah, the whole reason why I'm bringing up both of these things is that maybe less so Bell Book and Candle, although I appreciate it and I love it and it's so like charming, but the we can't lose these things. You know what I mean?
No,
Like, I'm not trying to get on a soapbox and say art is art and we need to save art and all that stuff. Um, it's true, we do. But we're going into the next 4 years. I don't have to say why, but we're going into a section of humanity where intellectualism and art are probably going to be lessened, and we can't let that happen. And so, buy Towering Inferno, Poseidon Adventure, go watch Barbarian, go like support these things. Go to your comic store. Go like I don't care. Like just like
Yeah,
support these things because they're very important.
it's very
Before we
yeah.
go, I want to give some kind thoughts. I want everybody to kind of like you know, think positive thoughts for Sean Isaacs, who's going through a surgical procedure over in South Africa. Sean is my co-creator on Stray, and I want to give a shout out to Rob Ullman, who just had shoulder surgery. Rob is
Oh,
the most
wow,
talented artist I've ever met. So much fun to talk to at a convention. So great
great.
to just call him my friend. And the fact that he can't draw for a couple of weeks is probably killing him. So
Yeah,
reach out to him, tell him you're thinking about him, you want him to get better, and just tell him we sent you.
sending positive vibes, everybody. All
We're gonna
right.
need him 2025, yo.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks for this conversation, Vito. This was
Absolutely.
fun.
These are. It's funny. These are fun, and I think people are catching on to how much fun these conversations we have in my car that are usually me driving home from work saying with Dean talking about Guardians of the Galaxy or something. Like, did you see how Kirby this part in Thor was? Like the Kirby design in Thor Ragnarok, and I'm like, yes, Dean, I saw it. All right,
All right.
Dean, have a good week.
You too.
All right, bye.